Andy and I are here to do a instant canned history of the dry martini. The dry martini began as a little variation on the Manhattan dry vermouth instead of sweet vermouth, hence the dry martini. London dry gin came in very soon into its history in the 1890s. I'm going to make what we call nowadays the Fitty Fitty version, as popularized by, or repopularized, I should say, by Audrey Saunders at the Pegu Club in New York City, and that's half gin and half vermouth. I can hear people saying, what? But wait until you try it. It's a much lighter and smoother drink than the standard 1950s style rocket fuel dry martini, which is also good. But this is a very simple drink. Again, 3 ingredients. We normally think of a martini as 2, but it lost one along the way. I'm going to start with 1.5 ounces of dry vermouth in there, splashed in maybe a little too enthusiastically because I like these, and 1.5 ounces of Beefeater, an excellent London dry gin for this. And finally, to tie it all together, look back into cocktail history, a couple dashes of orange bitters. I'm using Gary Regan's, which have a nice herbal note to them. You'll need that later. Now, stirred drinks, I like cracked ice, so I'm going to crack my cubes here. I said cubes.
You did say cubes.
And then stir. Again, this is a stirred drink. James Bond had many, many virtues, but when it came to martinis, he was an idiot. I'm sorry.
Just tell him what you really feel, Vic.
You want that silky, smooth texture. A little more. Patience. All right, good. My glass is chilled. Now, back in 1910, when this drink was first popular, people would put an olive in it sometimes. Sometimes, God knows why, they'd even put a cherry in it, which just seems like madness to me. But the real connoisseurs like theirs with the lemon twist. So I'm going to follow their lead and get the little slick of lemon oil on the surface. That is the old-fashioned dry martini, the original dry martini.
It's almost a misnomer by how we think about today's dry martini, because what the dry martini became, especially during the 60s and 70s, was the whole idea of extra dry, extra, extra dry, grab the bottle of vermouth and wave it over the glass, you know, all kinds of rituals. And again, the martini drinker is a very particular drinker, and you don't necessarily force your style of martini on the martini drinker. You find out what they like, and you bring it to them that way. So we address this because there are many ways to make a martini, and we should talk about all of them.
I mean, some people, the 50-50 version is coming back, which is why we're showing it to you in all the kind of new style speakeasy bars, etc. And it's lovely and delightful, but again, do not force that on anybody.
But it speaks to the point of what we talk a lot about, the whole idea of vermouth. Vermouth is aromatized wine. It's delicious, and it should be kept in the refrigerator and treated carefully, because you don't want it just sitting around in your well forever and ever, because then it will go bad and then it will become nasty. But treated properly, it's a product worth utilizing. That said, let's talk about a slightly different style. The traditional extra dry martini just incorporates a little bit of the dry vermouth as the aromatized wine to dry out the gin. So we're going to do this by, I'm going to make actually 2 here, and I'm going to make them in this oversized mixing glass so that you can see what I'm doing here. I'm going to basically season the ice. So I put my vermouth in. You see I already have the ice in the glass. I like to mix my, my drinks like this over the ice, because again, when I'm stirring, I want to make sure that dilution happens. I want to keep that process going. So I like to get it going just as soon as I start putting the spirits in and let a little bit of that dilution happen. Now what I've done is I'm seasoning the ice and coating it, but I'm actually going to dump most of it out, which is kind of a crime and a little bit of a shame.
So this is the in-and-out martini.
The in-and-out martini, but what it's done is I've got the same amount of vermouth going over my ice. The ice cubes are seasoned. They've got the aromatized wine, the vermouth, on them, so that when I put the gin on top of it, it's going to dry the gin out. Now, you may have heard that term, bruising the gin, don't bruise the gin. That's really just a way of saying, don't let it sit on the ice too long. I don't want the dilution because I want to taste the gin. I don't want it watery. I want it ginny. So that said, since we're going to do a couple here, normally be a 3-ounce pour, we're just going to double that up. And we'll go with our 2-ounce jigger, we'll go 3 times. And we'll get a nice 6 ounces in here to go along with
That's all for me.
It's all for you, my friend, because you know what? Nobody deserves it more than you do. A good martini at the end of a good day.
There we go.
And then, again, we talk about the idea of stirring. It's one of those opportunities just to show you know what you're doing, to show that someone can feel comfortable ordering these types of drink. It's a lost art. Let's not fool ourselves. Many people have neglected the stir because so many martinis today are expected to be shaken. People think of that whole idea of having the shaved ice across the top of the glass, and many people like that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But think about the martini as a cocktail that you have to ask many questions about. Is it going to be gin? Is it going to be over the ice or in a cocktail glass and served up? Are you going to serve it with olives or a twist? And you know, this last thing could be, would you like it stirred? Because if you can stir a martini, it's really the proper way to do it. And you should give people an opportunity to have it the proper way. If you don't know how to stir, spend some time practicing with it. It's as simple as killing some time at the beginning of a shift when there's nobody at your bar, grabbing your mixing glass and going to town. So here we go. We've got enough for a couple of cocktails here. Be very careful about the gigantic glassware because you don't want to be serving to your customer a 7-ounce martini. I don't know if you noticed, but everything I put into this glass was 80 proof alcohol, except for a little bit of vermouth. So that's a strong drink. 7 ounces of that's going to really hurt somebody, and you might want to have a conversation with that person sometime later in the evening, and they might want to actually have a conversation with you, or maybe settle their check in a conscious way. Couple of olives into this drink. This extra dry martini style would traditionally be served with olives. Again, you could ask, you could do the lemon twist in this, but again, the martini is a drink that presents many variations. Don't forget to ask the questions because it's the consumer who's going to drive it. But here's a couple of different ways to see how
it's a conversation drink.
Great conversation. Start a conversation with one of your guests right now.